Okay. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos Psuli Hamukdashim, prakim Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, and the final Perek Yud Tes. Perek Yud Zayin is going to continue with the rule that we learned yesterday that a carbon kachim can only become spigul when the only invalidating machshava is machshavas hazman, and that's going to lead us into the difference that we already learned previously between the avodas hadam on the hour altar, even though there are many steps that ideally should be done, but if you did only one application of dam, then you got the kapara, versus the avodas hadam on the inner mizbeach, that every single step is essential, and how that will come back and affect this din. Pigul is when there's only a machshavas zman. We're going to learn other rules, like for example, toidas mefagelas lechem, but lechem eino mefagel es hatoida, as we'll explain. We're going to have other examples that ein mefaglin b'chatzi mater, as we learned yesterday when it came to the koimetz and to the levina, and many rules that emphasize the relationship between the two lambs that are offered on Shavuos for shlamim and the shtei halechem that are uniquely connected to those. Kevasim Chaver Perek Yud Zayin has 20 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says the Rambam, Kol hadomim hanitanim al mizbeach hachitzon, shenosan mehem atona rishoyna b'machshava nechayna, whether it is the domim that go on the bottom of the altar, whether they go on the top of the altar. So if the first application, which is the only one that's essential, was done properly, and then v'nosan mibatana sheniya ve'elach b'machshava sheni Hashem, oy machshava samokim, oy machshava sazman, and then you had an invalidating thought. But in the subsequent blood applications, based on the rule we learned above, that when it comes to the avodas hadam on the mizbeach hachitzon, only the first one is essential. Harei kippur and v'hurtzah hakarbon. In other words, the ba'alim don't have to bring any other karbanis, right? Either was a machshavas Hashem, shini Hashem. So what? It was not done during the real essential blood application. Similarly, if the first application was done by machshavas hazman, which makes the carbon pigul, but that's only based on a condition that there won't be another machshavas hapoiselos. But the hishlam matan is b'machshavas hamakay. So even though we learned yesterday that if you had zman first, even though zman came first, if later you had a machshavas shinei hamakay, it will downgrade the psul from pigul to only relatively only pasul. Not over here. Here it will remain pigul because shematana dishoyna hiyo ikar gavaldik avol. In contrast, kol hadom manitam mizbeach hapnimi, and every single step is needed. Hoyel b'kulan ma'akman zed zeh, as we spoke out above. Therefore, im nasan achas mihem, if any one of them was given, shaloi ketiknon ela hifsid b'hamachshava afal pishanosan kol ashar ketiknon. Doesn't matter when it happened. Let's go to the first case of halacha aleph. The first one was done properly. The last one was not done properly as zevach pasul. Also halacha beis chashav b'rishayim machshavas hazman v'shasag b'sha'ar v'shenos an kolam kitiknon chutz min achrein v'shenos b'machshavas hazman. Now listen to this, guys. Hareze pasul ve'einoi pigul. Because kulon the machshavas hazman. Wow. In other words, based on the rule that we had, that you cannot create pigul b'chatzi maten, the one case we had yesterday was that if you had a machshavas chutz l'zman, only when you burnt the kemitza, not when you burnt the levina. And for that we say no, the kemitza and the levina both have to be offered for you now to be allowed to eat the shirayim. So they are called together one matir. Each one is only called a chatzi matir, and ein mefaglim a chatzi matir. So since every single dam application is essential, gevaldik, even though the only thought you had was machshavas hazman, but you only had it by one or almost all, but not by all of the dam applications. So therefore, yes, pasul, not pigol. Sharei kulim b'matona achas, saying, wow, halachi gimel, tfilas etzba b'dam achatas apnimiyos. Another detail of dam. Even on the outer altar, if you remember by the chatos, the kohen ideally is supposed to put his finger in the mizrak and then smear his finger down, with holding the thumb and holding the middle finger, holding it on the two sides. But again, these details are not essential. In the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the dipping, the tvila, the tovel hakoin as its boy badam is essential. So therefore, that the kavana that you had during the tvila has a power, a negative power. Machshava moyelas, ketzad. Chashav v'shas tvila setzva badam machshavas azman. That is mamish arezik emachashav v'shas azoyom. Halacha dalat. Choya oimid ba'azara. Another detail from the coin standing in the azara. Choshev machshavas hazman bechatois hanasis bifnim. That's all the thought he had was machshavas hazman, but it was regarding the davar hanasa bifnim. But it was regarding a step that will happen inside. He just said, "I'll do that inside beyond the prescribed time." As the Rambam in a second will give an example. Also, ain't a pigol. Only if choshev b'davar hanasa b'chutz. While he's outside, his machshavas zman that can make pigul is only if it's about something that's done in the location where he's having that machshava. He's a pigul. For example, Allah, hey, wow. While he's in the zara, he says, and during the shchita, I'm going to put the dam on the mizbeach tomorrow. That's a classic machshavas hazman. However, you're standing outside when you're doing the shchita. The dam, we're speaking about karbanis whose bloods are put inside. So your machshavas chutz lezman is in a different location. Einoi pigol. Because Azoya is lifnim behechel. However, hoya oimid behechel, or the same thing in the opposite direction. While you are in the hechel, v'amar areni mazer, I am and while you were pouring the dam on all of the matnas adam, you had in mind lishprech shirayim lamacha. Now the pouring of the shirayim is also essential by chatois, by the karbanis that are done inside. Also ain't a pigel because I had a chashav bifnim regarding a step that you do outside. Now, where will a machshavas pigel be effective and render this carbon pigel? Aval you're oimed bazar, and you're doing the avoid of outside, which is the shchita. And you're thinking of pouring the shenayim, which is also done out there on the outer altar tomorrow, or while you're doing the shechita, you have in mind lemachar. So your thought was while you were outside of the hechel about a step of the avodah that's done outside. Yes, it is a pigol. Okay, now halacha zayin. Let's move on to the toid and the lechem. And as we learned that the carbon toida that comes with 40 loaves of bread, the kedusha of the breads are fully imbued when you do the shechita of the toida. So says the Rambam, ha-toida mefagelas as halechem, but a kavana regarding the lechem won't be mefagel the toida. Notes which one is subservient to the other one. The lechem is secondary to the animal and not the other way around, and that will affect the power of pigol ketzad, for example. While the shoichet is shechting the carbon toida, for example, that he's going to eat the meat, or he's going to throw the blood, or he's going to burn the emurim tomorrow, which is a classic pigul machshav. So here the rule will be, he had that kavana, guys, during shchita. Shchita is the moment that sanctifies the breads. If that shchita was mefagel the meat, it automatically is mefagel the bread. Hazevach im alechem pigul. Avo, however, if while he was doing the shchita, he had in mind that he's going to be eating the bread tomorrow, and the bread, like the carbon shlamim, uniquely by Toida, may only be eaten for one day and one night. So he had a machshavas chutz lizman only regarding the bread. That affected the bread. Halechem lebadei pigul, but the zebach Toida ain't a pigul. How great is that? And the same is when it comes to the relationship between the two kifsei atzeres, shalmei tzibur with the shtei alechem. Once you make the lamb spigol automatically nispagu shtei alechem. But if the only machshavas man was regarding the breads, and indeed that makes the shtei alechem pigol, but it doesn't automatically, it doesn't with it schlep along the kevasim. The kevasim are not pigol. Now we're continuing when it comes to the Shnei Kavasim. Lechoil, my friends, there is a mistake. I don't know how you have it in people that are learning in other Rambams. In the Chayenu, they're missing a word here. Very important. Lechol chatzi, you have to add that. You'll see, it must be that way. That if you had a mind to eat half of the kazayis of the meat, with chatzi, again, add the word chatzi. It's a mistake that it's not in there. Halechem lomachar. So we learned yesterday, chatzi zayis with chatzi zayis combines. What will be the halach over here? Listen to this. Halechem levade will be pigul. This is amazing. But whether it was toidam and a chatzi zayis of the lechem, whether it was a chatzi zayis of the keves with the chatzi zayis of the shtei lechem, the animals won't be pigul. It combines. Yes, it only combines one way, based on the same logic, because we view the lechem as a subsidiary. You understand, of the meat. So from the perspective of the subsidiary, you have a full kazayis of pigul. But when it comes to the ikar, the chatzi kazayis lechem is not as chashuv as. So it doesn't combine it in that direction. Halachates. Let's go to another carbon in which you have two parts and they're bound. And that are the 12 panim breads with the spoons of incense. So and while you were being makted both of the bazichim, you had in mind that you're going to eat the lechem upon him tomorrow. So the din is the lechem becomes pigul. Only to eat one of the two chalos tomorrow. Here the din will be both breads are pigul. Now, what's very important to emphasize is that the Rambam is writing it only in the direction that you shechted both animals. While you shechted both animals, you had in mind to eat one challah. Here we say, even though you only had machshava on one, both become pigul. But that's because you had that machshava by both animals. Both animals are namatir for the lechem. Therefore, if you were to have the machshavas chutz l'zman when you shechted only one, that will be another case. Ein mefaglin b'chatzi mater. It will not render the breads pigul. Possible, yeah, pigul not. Halacha yudaf. Hikter shtei abozichin. Hu mechashev. While this kavanah you had by both bazich. Lechol echad mishnei asadarim l'machar. Just like we had an halacha yud. Both of these sedarim are considered one unit. Since you had the kavanah by both bazichen, so you affected pigul not only regarding the one seder, the one arrangement, shnei sedarim pigul, all of the 12 chalos are pigul. Regarding one challah, whenever there's a group of breads, if the machshava during the entire matir was only regarding one of the breads, all of the breads become pigul. Halacha yud gimel. All of the above is when it comes to pigul. Avol, however, let's go to another topic. Im nitmeis achas mishtei achalois. If one of these two chalos of the shtei alechem of Shavuos became tamei, oy echad mishnei asadorim. One arrangement, 6 out of the 12, or one of the 12. Oy achas min chalois hatoida, one of the 40. Bein lifnei zrika, bein la'achar zrika, gavaldik. By the way, the zrika is when we're speaking about the two breads. Whenever we're speaking about the arrangements, he means the burning of the bazichen. So the din is only oisa achala, and only oisa seder asur. Tuma doesn't affect one the other, and the ones that are not halachically tamei may be eaten. Halacha yudalet. Here we go clearly, but we spoke out above. Here, only while you were doing the avodah of one of the lambs, you had in mind sheyoichel kazayis mishtei halechem l'machar. Now we already said that even though the machshava was about one of the breads, if it will make it pigul, both will become pigul. However, your machshava was only when you were shechting one of the lambs. Or Only echad mishnei abozichem. That you're going to have a kazayis melechem upon him l'machar. That machshava, again, it's a machshava zman, that it will affect the bread negatively. You bet it will, but not pigul. Harei halechem pasul, but ain't a pigul. That's called ein mefaglin b'chatzi mater. So since both kavasim have to be slaughtered, both bazichim have to be burnt, one of the two is called half. Or you had the same negative thought when you did the avoid of burning both of the bazichim, mamish, like we learned yesterday, the koimitz and the levaina, that only them together are considered a mater. And any machshevas chutz l'zman by only one of them, pasul, yeah, pigul not, halachat as well. Shachad echad. You shechted one of the lambs, okay, on Shavuos. And v'chashav lechol chatzi zayis mechala zulama. Machshevas chutz lezman and a half a kazayis, which in itself won't be affected. Then you shechted the second lamb, the other chatzi mater. And weiter v'chashav only about chatzi zayis from the other chalal lamach. Says the Rambam, and therefore the breads will be pigul. Another detail, only the breads are pigul. Don't forget, the guys, right? The animals are not pigul. That's what we learned in this chapter, because if the meat is pigul, automatically the breads are pigul. Whenever the breads are pigul, yeah, the animals are not. But the point is the breads will be pigul. It's when you offered each bazach or each baziach, you had in mind to eat half of a kazayis of the lechem apanim tomorrow. Halacha tezvav choshav be'echad b'shnei hakavasim machshevas hazman and v'osa sheni b'machsheva nechoina, and the other one was brought properly. Zesha also b'machshevas hazman is pigul. So here, guys, we're not speaking about you, when you shechted the lambs, you had in mind to eat the bread. Now that we already said, in order to be mefagel the bread, you have to have a machshavas hazman by both. Here we're speaking about when you slaughtered one lamb, let's say you had in mind that the zrikas hadam of this lamb will be done tomorrow. When you slaughtered the other lamb, you did it properly. Now, when do we say that one lamb is a chatzi mater? Only in its relationship to the breads. Because for you to be able to eat the breads, you have to shech both of the lambs. The lamb, as it relates to itself, it's a standalone korban. So that lamb becomes pigul, and the other lamb is kosher. How great is that? Let me word it different. And therefore, but payal mamish, all you would have to do right now is bring one other lamb. And now you'll have both kavas. Halacha yudzai. You didn't have in mind regarding the bread. You didn't have in mind regarding itself, but you had in mind regarding the other lamb. That's b'chlal nothing. The Rambam says not only is it not pigul, it's not even pasul. How great is it? In other words, they're mamash considered one vis-a-vis the lechem. But vis-a-vis one, the other lamb, they're completely separated, which is why we mentioned in halacha tazayin that even in the case where one became pigul, all you need to do is to replace the one that's pigul. You don't have to replace both, because they're not related with each other if you're not focusing on the breads. Halacha yudches. Shnei kifsiyat seres ein mekachem es halechem. Only when that you do the act of shchita ketzad shchotam and v'zorak damen b'machshava shina yashem. And what does that render? Every time you have a machshava shina yashem, even though you continue with the avodah, but that carbon does not count, so it's no longer considered kipsei atzeres loy kiddush alechem shchotam lishman. And even though you threw the blood shaloi lishman. This is amazing. Now, throwing the blood shaloi lishman means that did the community bring the two kevasim? No, they didn't yet. 2 lambs will have to be re-brought. Question is, how do we view the chalas? Halechem kadosh ve'eino kadosh. The Rambam doesn't speak out explicitly. What does it mean? It's holy and not holy. So really, this is a sugya in the Gemara. The Rambam is hoping that we look through there. And in the Gemara, the meaning is that the kohanim may not eat it. But all of the dinim of kedusha are in those breads. So basically, what would happen is that it will de facto become noiser, and then it's going to be burnt. Shchatan shaloi lishman. But on the other hand, if the shchita was not done lishman, even though the zrikas adam was done lishman, here b'chlal lekadash alechem, which is a great thing, because now these same lechems could be used when you're going to replace the 2 lambs. The 2 lambs have to be brought again, even though you go through with avodah. And kavasim, which are shlamim, can be eaten, but like all of the ba'alim. Here the ba'alim is the community. Halacha yutes. Shtei halechem sheyotzu bein shchita lezrika. That means it was taken out of the azara area, which is where it must be eaten. And then v'zorek damakvasim. And while you did the zrika, you had a machshevas hazman. Now, what did we learn in this chapter? That once the meat, the animals become pigul, it automatically is mefagel the breads. The breads are like buckled to the meat. One might have thought that since the breads are outside the azara, at least they won't become pigul. Now, guys, they're puzzled because of yotzei. So no one is allowed to eat it. The question is, if someone eats it, are they chayiv kares? Or to word it even practically, if someone eats it b'shoigig, do they have to bring a chatas? That's only if there's a chayiv kares. So the din is yes, nispag l'shnei alechem, even though they are bachutz. And look at these words, because zrikas hadam is effective, guys, always effective means negatively. It's effective la yotzei afapi shadainu bachutz. Halacha chav, the final halacha of this chapter, kivsei atzeres sheshachtan lishman, and now you lost the bread. So like this, im zadak daman lishman, then harei elu psulim. Why? What's shader psulim? You don't have the breads. What do we say when the kavasim are psulim? Just to make it clear, they may be eaten. They may be eaten. It's like shlamim, for example, that was offered shalei lishma. It's not like it's not pasul. Psulim means that li'olu l'ba'alim. That's what it means over here. Zorak daman de machshavas hazman. And guys, second time in this chapter, I don't know what the Rambam you're looking at. This is a Torah Sefer here. And I know that even the other Rambam that I was learning yesterday, it also said b'machshavas hazman. It cannot mean it. You'll see. The Rambam's words is Zorak daman b'machshavas shinoi Hashem, which also has the din that if it's not chatas and Pesach, the animal may be eaten. Achar she'aver alechem. Then, harei l'safek, if you can eat the lambs, it's gavaldik. Why would you be allowed to eat the lambs? Because, like we said, it's machshavas chutz l'shem doesn't invalidate it, or if it doesn't even allow for that to happen. Because here there's another issue. The other issue is that you don't even have the breads, gavaldik, and therefore maybe they are completely disqualified. And therefore, the meat, b'chlal, may not be eaten. Gavaldik. Moving on to Perek Yudches, which is the second to last chapter in Hilchos Psuli HaMikdashim. So what we had until now, we had of the 3 general categories of machshavos that are moyeles to invalidate the carbon. And again, I know that Rambam is not speaking over here about who has to compensate, but the Rambam will be now speaking about that whoever had such a machshava violated the law. We're not speaking about financials, we're speaking about dinei yisurim. There is a law, lachshav machshavas, that are not okay by kachim. And then this chapter will deal more about pigul. And again, we're mamish going to limit more the cases of pigul to tell you that when are you chayiv kares, or to say practically, when you ate it b'shoigig, when are you chayiv chatas for eating pigul, is only if it was on something that needed to have a matid and not on the matid itself. I know these words sound a little bit strange. Same thing happened when we learned the Gemara. The Rambam will clearly explain what that means. Pigul is only chal. These are the words. Al davar shuhutar al yedei matir, and not on the matir itself. Let me just speak it out right now. I'll give you an example. When you throw the dam on the mizbeach, nothing needed to be done to be matir the zrikas adam al mizbeach. Shchita was not matir the dam. Shchita just allows you to get to the dam. The emurim are being matir. They're allowing meat to be eaten, but the emurim themselves only are allowed to be burnt on the altar after you did the zrikas adam. So if during the zrika there was a machshavas chutz l'zman which rendered everything pigul, if someone now were to eat the emurim, they'll be chayv chatos or kados if they did it the mezid. Why? Because the emurim is something that only became allowed to be burnt on the altar when everything was done well, if another step was done prior to it. What happens if someone eats dam? Now, guys, we know eating dam is a problem. You bet it is. Your chayv kados just for eating dam. Yes. Your chayv chatos just for eating dam. Yes. We're speaking about the lav of pigul. Even when there was a machshavas chutz l'zman only, dam itself won't be prohibited to be consumed because of the lav of pigul, because dam is not something that became mutir al yidei matir. And again, we'll speak to that more when we learn inside. We're going to learn in this chapter the isur of noiser, which is very simple. We never spoke about it. We're going to learn, just like there's a lav to invalidate a carbon through a negative machshava, there is a lav to make kachim tamei. And then we're going to learn how pigul and noiser and tamei that got all mixed up together. Each one, Danny, is usud on the penalty of kares. Each one, if it got mixed up together and you ate a kazayas, which is only a combination of pigul, noiser, and tamei, how these three Isuri kares, yes, combine, and the eater will speak all b'shoigig, will be chayiv chatos. Also to make it clear, like when we learned the whole sugi of Shabbos, we're not speaking about the shayim, God forbid. In other words, the difference between whether something is only a lav or whether something has in it kares is that whether you're going to get malchus is b'mezid when there is a lav. Or b'shoigig, something that you're only chayiv malchus for, b'shoigig, you're not going to be penalized. Something for which b'mezid you chayiv kares, then b'shoigig you have to be chayiv chatos kavul. Perik Yud Ches has 24 halachas, and let's begin with halacha. Obviously, a machshava that will invalidate it. You should know that person was over b'loisa say. Where does it say in the Torah? That's the meaning of the words lo yechashed. Halacha beis. The Piyash Molamdu, Shebechlal din zeh, Ishalo Yafsir HaKotchim b'machshava, Shahadei Doime Lamatal Mum b'Kotchim. Even though they're very different. Because when someone, which is the simple pshat Dani over that pasuk, when someone is physically blemishing Kotchim, they did a meiser. They violated a law, they're going to be chayiv malchus. If someone invalidated the oivid we learned yesterday, not the bal hakarbon, but if someone rendered your carbon not only pigul, apostle, if they did it through a machshava, they won't get malchus. But as far as they violated the law, they violated the law of lo yechash. Halachigim. Kol carbon shenema shu pasul, which is all of the invalidations other than pigul. Ben shenifsel b'machshava, ben shenifsel b'maisem, ben she'era lo davar shepsaloi. However, it came to that point, so that will be the din. B'mezid you'll be chayiv malchus. Eating is a mice. Which is amazing. That's a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh, but the meaning of kol to'eva is not the normally kol to'eva refers to the shrotzin. No, this pasuk is speaking about kach. Now let me just add a detail. And if you did it b'shoigeg, guys, remember the rules. Any lav for which you chayiv malchus without kares b'mezid, biblically, b'shoigig, you won't be penalized at all. Halachadal. The Pnei Shmuel Lamdu that this lo yisoichal kol toyeva is not about the normal toyeva. She'ein hakasam mazet ela absul emigdash. Okay, chen kachum shutl b'mum. So it's a balmum, and you're not allowed to eat it. Right? That's a classic psulei amukdashim. They're gonna have to be redeemed, but you didn't redeem it yet, and you ate it. Whoever eats is chayiv malchus. Guys, Avi just want to add a detail. Of course, Danny, that's if you ate it before you were poided. It's not kachim that have a mum. They're salvageable to a certain point, right? Even after you were poided, there are certain restrictions. We know that, but the law of eating it is prior to the pig. And that's where do you have in the Torah love? So this Toyev is going to any Psulei Abu Kadosh. Now the Rambam is writing a nuance that's not so clear. So let me ask you a question. If someone themselves blemished the animal, if God forbid, if Reuven blemished the kachim, so first of all, what did we learn in here? He's chayiv malchus. Now let me ask you a question. Can he now redeem the animal and eat it? So there's another nuance that if someone b'mezid was matal mum bekachim, we don't allow him to eat it until the animal develops another mum. But guys, this is only a knas midrabanan, just to make it clear. Midoiraisa, now that the animal is blemished and it was redeemed, even though Reuven was the one that did the blemishing, Reuven can eat it. Since he did the blemish, the Chacham made a knas, and that's the little nuance over here. Then they said, no, you have to wait until it would have been blemished anyway. Now, Safek Daraisa L'chumra, absolutely. But you're not going to be chayiv malchus on it. Halacha Kol carbon shenispag l'machshavas azman, as was explained a lot above. Here, not only is it a lav, now we're seeing a practical difference between puzzle versus a worse labeling of pigol. Kol ha'oichel mimenu kazayis b'meizid hu yachayiv kares. Shenemar, as it says, v'hanefesh ha'echeles b'menu avoynatis. Avoynatis on the nefesh means kares. Te'imachel b'shgaga. So if a person b'shoigeg violated the lav, they're not going to get penalized at all. If it's a lav sheyesh by kares, then b'shoigeg they bring a chatos kavua. Allah chazay. Ein chayavin ela al achilas devarim shehutru. When are you going to be chayiv? Kares bein lo adam bein la mizbeach. Not that's what we spoke about in the intro. That's if you ate something that needed a matter. If the matter would have been done okay, if everything would have been done okay, then only because something was done can now this step happen. We're not only speaking about achilas adam, we're speaking about achilas mizbeach. Can the emurim of a carbon be burnt on the altar? The answer is they have to be burnt on the altar, but you have to first wait for zrikas adam. Can you eat the meat? Yeah, after the emurim are burnt. Achilas basar is only allowed when everything is okay if the emurim are brought. So the emurim is the matir for the achila. The emurim being burned can only be done if the dam was done. The dam is that which is matering the emurim. Can you say that something needs to be done to be matir zrikas adam? No. Dam doesn't have a matir. Technically, you don't have the dam if you don't do shchita. I understand it. But we don't say that the shchita is matir the dam was zrik. Shchita just allows you to get the dam. So when are you chayiv kares? Only if you ate something that needed a matir. Min hamatir atzmai. I don't only mean dam. You know what will be another matir atzmai? Koinus. The kemitza that's meant to be burned, nothing needed to happen to be matir the kemitza. You needed to take it, but the levoina itself doesn't have a matir. So even in a case where this carbon mincha became pigul, when is the person who's eating the pigul is going to be chayiv chatas kavua b'shoigeg if he ate something that needed a matir? But if he ate the matir itself, is the emurim a matir itself? Yes and no. The emurim is also a matir, right? The emurim is matir the basar, but the emurim also became mutir because of the dam. So the emurim, if someone ate the emurim, they'll be chayiv kares. Ain't a chayiv kares, but they'll be chayiv malchus if he did it the mason. But not the
blood itself.
Very good. Rambam is going to speak it out. Very good. Now, one more second, guys. Blood, chayiv kares anyways. I know that. But you'll be chayiv or chatas kavua. We're speaking about pigul. Because we're limiting the scenarios where a person actually, God forbid, violated pigul. Okay, so mincha shenispaglom. So ha'oichel kezayis mishiorel b'mezid chayiv kares. If a person ate min ha'koymet shalom or min ha'lavoina, ain't a chayiv kares. Even though that is pigul, guys, make no mistake, but he won't be chayiv kares. Or by a zebar, by an animal, or even from the emurav, that's the chiddush. In other words, even though the emurim are the matir to the basar, but the emurim also need themselves to be matir through the zrikas adam. Oy mipsar ha'oila, right? The psar ha'oila has to be burnt on the altar, but you know when you can burn the psar ha'oila on the altar only after you did the avodas hadam. The dam is matering the basar. Then you chayiv kodesh. Avlam k'zayis min adam. Ain't a chayiv olav on the dam because of pigul. Shadam materes emurim l'karol mizbeach. The emurim are the matirim as habasar la'adam. The dam ha'oila is matir the b'sar l'mizbeach. Let's go further. The dam ha'chatos ha'oiv is allowing the kohanim to eat the meat, even by an oila. The dam ha'oila is matering. You know what it's matering? When are you allowed to burn the oila so'if on the mizbeach? Only after you did the avoid of the mitzvah yadam. The dam oila so'if matir b'sar l'mizbeach. Let's go more. He's giving all these examples. Dam chatois, hanis rafois, matir emur l'mizbeach. Lefika chayovin al emureyem mishum pigol. If someone ate it b'shoigeg, they're going to be chayv chatos. Hakoymetz v'halavoinon matirim hashiyarim l'koyhanim. The two kevasim atzeres are the matirim of shtei alechem l'koyhanim. The two bazichen levoina are matirim lechem aponim l'koyhanim. These are all devarim that if someone ate them, if there was only a machshavas chutz l'zman, as we learned many prakim already. Now, when it is pigul, you'll take a b'chayv kares. Avol devarim she'en lematirim, like he's saying a gavaldige thing. Not the emurim of the chatois hanisrafos, but the sar hachatois hanisrafos. It's amazing. We don't say, Danny, that the dam, the shchita, the dam of the chatas hanisrafos, mattered it. No, you know why? Because since God says it has to be burnt, it never became mutter. Something that's meant to be burnt on the inner altar, that's called achilas hamizbeach.
The outer altar is not achilas hamizbeach.
Also, but the chatois and esrafais are the karbanis whose avodas adam are done b'fnim. They're taken outside Yerushalayim. That's not called an avodah. So if someone eats from that, that's not something that became mutter. No, it was something that was designated to be burnt. Are you allowed to eat it? Of course not. If you eat it b'mezid, you'll be chayiv lo'isechel kol ta'eva. You'll be chayiv malchus. You're not going to be chayiv chatas kavua. Umenachos hanisrafos ein mispaglim la'olam. Halachiches. Le'elu devarim she'ein chayav aleim mishum pigul la'olam. So the Rambam is making a synopsis. Hakoymetz itself, halavayna, the ketaytis, the dam, wine, whether wine came with nesachim or whether the standalone wine, as we go back to the beginning, standalone wine is poured on top of the mizbeach. Then the wine that comes with the nesachim, according to the Rambam, is only poured on the yesoid, because since it became mutter al yedei dam, even though yayin can only be done after you did the avoid of the animal, but since you can bring the nesachim tomorrow or in 10 days, so they're not that linked to say that one matter the other. Umenachos, all the menachos that have to, if you have to burn like a mincha of a kohen, all of it has to be burned. So that's it. It's like the kohemes. Sherei eilahem kohemes lahatiram. Keep going. Which mincha has to be fully burned? Like we learned, either if it came from a kohen, even on a dover from a kohen. Soilas, right? Machavas marcheshes, the kik and chalos, or minchas nesachim. Minchas nesachim that comes with an animal, all of it has to be burned. Or ubesar chatois hanisrafos, because the blood avodah was done inside. Or and the loik shemen shel mitzoida. Now, hold 1 second. Now I know we have to learn these dinim in more detail, but the Rambam is asking them, dam ha'asham is needed for you to be allowed to do the avodah with the loik hashemen. So why don't we say that it is something that needed the matir? The Rambam says no. Eino tolaboy. Just like we spoke about the nesachim and the wine. And even if he doesn't have the oil now, he's allowed to bring the loig after many days, as we will learn. Guys, this is an ilchas mechusri kapara. So therefore, even though it's connected, but if it doesn't have to be brought at the same time, mamish like the wine, even though it's coming with the carbon, we don't view the carbon as being its matter. Halacha 9. Asur lo hoiseh. Now we're learning a new din. So now we're moving on from pigul to noisar. And that is just like you're not allowed to render an animal pigul, you're chayiv a lav. You're not going to be chayiv malchus, but you're violating a lav. You're not allowed to leave over. That's the fetish, as it says in Parshas Emor. But the Torah speaks there about a carbon toida. By toida, even though it's in the category of shlamim, but it's only one day and one night. And really, that's not only regarding the toida. Now, let's go. If someone violated this law, will they be chayiv malchus? Also not, because now the Rambam could have said because she'ein by ma'isa. The Rambam is writing something, another reason. If I'm not mistaken, it was a machlekes tanoim. What is the reason? One reason is nitkaya kosav la'aseh. Because any time that the Torah, after telling you don't do X, Y, or Z, says that if you did violate, this is how you rectify it. That action is its rectification and not your malchus. And now the question is, Danny, if someone is unable to burn the meat because the meat got lost, that's the whole question. If we're going to say that Allah she'ein boy ma'isa loikin olav, then you'll be chayiv malchus. If, as the Rambam already said in this chapter, regardless, she'ein machshava ma'isa, no, the Rambam is emphasizing that lav she'ein boy ma'isa ein loikin olav, then even when you cannot do the asay, you also won't be chayiv malchus. So that's really a question. So why does the Rambam write shahadei nitka yakosav la'asay? That's not the essential reason. Regardless, they said it's through inaction. I don't know. Halachi ha'oichel ksais mamsar kochim shenoisa. Now if you ate noisa, mamash, that's a case of mezid. The mezid chayv kares. If you're a shoygeg chatzas kavua. Shenemar, as it says, va'oichlav avoyna yiso. Yes, kodesh Hashem chilol v'nichras ha'nefesh ha'imameh. And that's the rule. If you chayv kares v'mezid, you chayv chatzas kavua b'shoy. Now, umeim is chayv kares alachilas anoise im kachi kachim, which has one day and one night. Then chayv alema achash yalamud hashachar im kachim kalam heim. I know that Rambam writes kachim kalim, but let me tell you something. We're speaking not about all kachi kalim. Toidas kachi kalim. We're speaking about the regular shlamim. The Rambam is speaking al areiv. Then chayv alem ishkias achama shel yom hasheni shutchilas halayla shel yom hashlish. And the heichen he's at a cost of al pigov al anoiser. You know, we spoke about the punishment, but as there is a klal, even when you have a pasuk that speaks about the punishment, there has to be some warning in the Torah prior or someplace else other than the punishment. Where is that? Where is the hazara? B'meluim and Parshas Tetzava. And that is lahazid kol shepisuli ba'kodesh, which also will include Naisar. Now another Pigul and Naisar both have the penalty of Kodesh. They combine. If you only ate a kazayis from both, you violated the Isur Sheyesh by Kodesh. In other words, Tachlis, if you ate a Chatzi kazayis of Pigul and a Chatzi kazayis of Naisar, you have to bring a Chatzos Kabul. Allah Yud Beis. Now, the final Kodesh issue by Psuli Amagudashim, Pigul, Kodesh, Noiser Kodesh, Tomei. Now, guys, don't confuse. There are two types of Tuma in Kachim. And one is when the Kachim themselves are Toher, and the Koyin is, the Kachim is Toher, the Koyin is Tomei. That's one issue. The other issue is when the kohen can be tar, but the meat is tamei. That's what we're talking about. So first of all, you can't ruin kachim, right? We began this pedic. Even if you're ruining it with a machshava, you're violating a law. Aim by malchus. So asur letamei asakachim. You can't directly make kachim tamei. You cannot indirectly lesavev lahem tuma. Sometimes you would think that doing it indirectly is not problematic. Yes, it is problematic because tuma invalidates it. However, why ain't a loika? Maybe because you have to burn it. Maybe because you need kalasei, or maybe because there's no love. Maybe the Torah never writes, don't do it. Abel adam tar. Sha'achal mikachim shenitmu loika. So you do have a lav for the eating part. I think it is, Danny. You don't have a lav for being metame it. Who adin l'sha'ara korbanos that watch im achal kezayis. Even though the pasuk that we quoted over there in Sav is regarding basar, it's not only regarding basar. But if you have, for example, you ate a kezayis from levoinas hamincha. Now, don't forget, a levoinas hamincha really needed to be offered on the mizbeach. Doesn't matter. Anything that's called kachim, once it's imbued with kedushas mizbeach, if it becomes tamei, you're not allowed to eat it. Shenitmeis achar sheneskacha b'kli. That's the key. It was imbued with kedushas mizbeach. If you are going to eat it, you'll be chayiv malkes, because the Torah says v'habasar ashiyiga lo yeyachal, and the Torah doesn't only mean meat. Echad kachim shenitmu lifnei kapara. Or whether, the meat became tamei after the kapara. Whether it became tamei ba'ava tumah, on a higher level of tumah, bein on the lower level of tumah. As long as it is tamei midoid isa, then you violated the law of midoid isa. However, aval and nitmu b'tumah shall live can't say that the Torah's words lo yei achel goes on that which biblically is not even tamei. Ain't no like al achilasan, but again, there's going to be rabbinic flogging. Now we're going to go into a huge qualification. The eino loika eloha oichel achar zirikas damim avol amachel koydem zirikas dam. So guys, the levoina we said you'll be chayiv, even though you didn't put it on the mizbeach. When it comes to eating meat that is tamei, when is there a chiyuv malchus? Only if zirikas adam was done, and that's a gzeira sham. Eino loika. Mishum Eichel Kodesh Tamei, but not going to say Makas Mardus because the Chachamim didn't want people to take this lightly. And guys, this is something that we learned in the Gemara that says super rational. Halacha Yigim. Kol Adam Shenitma Tuma Shechayim Lenkaris. I'll be a Samikdash. So first of all, here we learned, guys, two separate things. We learned about the person who's tahar. If they ate psar kachim, that's tamei after zrikas adam. The eating. That's where you violated this lo yei achel, for which you'll be chayiv malchus in some cases. Now we're learning about something else. Not that the kachim is tamei, the person is tamei. Halacha Yud Gimel. Kol adam shenitma, but it's tuma. What type of tuma? Tuma that if this person would have entered the holy place, he would have been chayiv kares. See, that's much worse. The person is tamei. That's the. And remember that was by Yikra, one of the three korbanos, not chatas kavua, but korban oil v'yored. One of them is called albiyas hamikdash. Like a person did it b'shoigeg, they have to bring depending on their wealth. And this person ate a kazayis min hakachim. Now look at the beauty here. Not only if they ate kodesh tar, even if he ate kodesh tamei, now eating kodesh tamei is already also mitzad alav, but here it's worse. Here it's a higher level of prohibition, and it's added. B'mezid chayiv kares. You are tamei, and you eat kachim. I don't care what the kachim is. Chayiv kares shenemar v'hanefesh asher toicham nipsar zevach hashlam hashlam tomasa yalav v'nichres. Remember, there's two psukim, guys. So if you're tired and you eat it, the kachim is tamei. You're chayiv malchus. You're not chayiv kares. It's called chayiv malchus b'mezid. B'shoigeg, you're not going to be penalized. If you were tamei, that's where you have isur kares. Now, if you did it b'shoigeg, you have to bring a chatas. That's not a case of chatas kavua, but that's clearly that's the case at the end of Parshas Vayikra. Right, the three sins. One of them is eating kachim while you are tamei. Maybe korban oil v'yored. And why don't we say that the same v'nichrasa is also if there's tuma? Maybe if you're tired and you eat kachim that's tamei, maybe you could get kares or have to bring a oil of the yored b'shoigeg. No, because it says v'nefesh kisiga b'chol tamei tumas adam b'behemoth tamei b'chol sheket tamei. No, the Torah is writing clearly that you previously became tamei, then v'achal nipsar zevach hashlam hashal Hashem, then v'nichrasa. And not when you are not tamei. Now, everything again, every punishment there has to be ein oinshin el imkein mazirin. So where is the hazard of a hechen? He's at 11 zeh by your ledes and tasriya. Shenemar b'chol kodesh loisiga. B'chol kodesh loisiga, guys, which includes you get it. The Torah is there telling you don't make it tamei. No, the Torah is telling you don't eat it, because if you're going to eat it, you're going to touch it. That doesn't mean it's not about the touching, it's about eating. And now, but here we have nuance, because as we know, even right from Meiser Sheni that you cannot eat betuma. That's the whole thing in Chagiga, right? The different milas. You're going to the mikveh, you can have Meiser Sheni. Once you go to Truma and Avada for Kachim, it's not enough to go to the mikveh. You have to wait for head of Shemesh. If someone went to the mikveh, but it's prior to head of Shemesh, or if you have from the 4 Mechusre Kippurim, if he waited until the night, but he didn't bring his kapara, koidim shivay kaparasai, taka problem, and you'll be chayiv malchus, but you won't be chayiv kadas. Which means, therefore, you won't be chayiv b'shoigeg the carbon oil of a yerd. Shenema v'tumasai olav, achetia tumasai olav, which is amazing. But they're two separate issues. You'll be chayiv malchus. You violated that doiraisa. The issue of kadas, the punishment of kadas, is that you are tummy. Halacha tezvav. We had many dafim of Gemara on this. It's good to remember that difference. And if the person is tummy, it's worse. Hoya tummy betuma shoulder v'reyem. Ain't like they ain't a chleimer. Ain't a chayiv kadas. But the chachamim will give him makas marks. Halacha tezay. Ain't a chayiv kadas alachilas kodesh yesh lematirin. Another important rule. This Isur Kodesh is only if you would not have been Tameh, you would have been allowed to eat it. For example, and you're Tameh, and Zahaklal. By the way, that's not only for this Kodesh. Ein chayav olive. For none of the sins for which you have kadas, not for pigul, not for noiset, not for tamei, ad sheyikrevu matirav kil chasam, and v'chol she'ei loy matirin. Here is where we say even shekadosh b'kli, like chveis levaina, someone who's tamei who ate levaina, they will be chayav kadas, chayav and olive mishum. So just like we had kol davar sheyesh lematirin concerning pigul, we have the same concept regarding only Yisurei Kodesh. Abol nitma habasar koydem sheyitame ha'oichel. And therefore, what, my friends? What did we just learn, David? If the meat is tummy, can you eat it? No. Now that you became tummy, can you eat it? No. What is normally the rule? What's normally the rule, my friends? Ein isur halal isur. But here we don't say ein isur halal isur. You will be chayiv kares. You get it? Why? Because isur ma'isa. Because when this meat was usher anyway, this meat, because the meat was tummy. But now that I became tummy, I may not even eat kachim that are tar with the penalty of kares. So since the isur of the kohen's becoming tummy prohibits all of kachim, it's also chal and that which was anyways already asur. So yes, isur halal isur. And here it's a big difference. It's not about being ma'chayiv malchus twice. It's much worse. Here you chayiv kares. Here you chayiv chatos carbon oil b'yedid. Only achash and izrak domon. Then it is a chayiv kares. But if you ate the meat, koydam zrikas domov. That's the rule that we're learning. You're only chayiv for the high level of Yisurim where there is kares, pigul noiset, and now you are tamei achi yikrevu matirav keil chasam, which means the avodah sadam needed to get done. Halacha yudzai. Kvar nisbar alacham she'af duvarim she'ein chayav alei mishum pigul chayav alei mishum noiset v'tamei. For example, duvarim she'ein lohem matirim, not shayich to pigul. But if that became tamei, chayav and olav mishum noiser tamei. Chena matira natzma. Afal pi she'ein chayav mishum pigul mishum biyanu chayav and olav mishum noiser tamei, with one exception, and that's dam. And that is she'ein chayav and olav lo'olam ela mishum dam. So let's say if you have a kohen that's tamei who eats any kachim, and we said even kachim that's possible. Even kachim that's tummy, chayiv kares, Everything not on dam. If he eats dam, he's chayiv kodes for eating dam. We know that, but that's the only prohibition. All this is from limudim. Halacha yuches tamei she'achal emurim. The din is you're chayiv kodes. If you ate a murim and you're not tamei, you're not allowed to eat it. It was supposed to be put on the mizbech. You're not chayiv kodes. Again, we don't say ein isur chalal isur. No, we say since when the kohen becomes tamei, he is not allowed to eat any of kachim. So that allows for the isur of him eating kachim even to be chal on the emurim. Halacha yutas. Now we're continuing with the tamei person, not the kachim that's tamei, which is lesser problematic. The person is tamei. So the kohen that's tamei who eats Pesach that wasn't properly prepared, shaloi mitzvah, or velach meitoida shaloi hu machalasan, harei zachayiv kadosh musaguf, afapi she'enu noyel mashehein. So it's the point that Rambam is continuously making. Again, the rule is ein yisur halal isur. But since a kohen that becomes tamei may not eat any kachim, so that isur, which carries a penalty of kodes, is chal on other kachim, which anyways may not be eaten for other reasons. But it's not a contradiction. There is room for this new isur to be chal. Efsher she is chayiv for adam alachila achas. The Rambam is writing a klal for both pigel and noiser. They are mutually exclusive. Why are they mutually exclusive? Because how does something become noiser? Something becomes noiser if it was allowed to be eaten or allowed to be burned, and then you did not do it in the prescribed time, it becomes noiser. Something that God says may not be done means once it became pigel, it's not shaykh to become noiser. So whenever we're going to speak soon about being mitzdaref, pigel, and noiser, it's about two different karbanis. One thing itself never has both. Shapigel hu are carbon shenif samal shavas hazman, and therefore be'ein l'shem carbon v'lo nitzakla. If lo nitza, it's never going to become noiser. But hanoiser who anishim and carbon shekarov kimitzvasim only lachas manachilosa. Having said that, so even though that one item won't be both, but you can have a shtickle pigel here and a shtickle noiser there. So the rule is that hapigel v'hanoiser v'hatamei. We're speaking about, Danny. We're speaking about the meat that's tamei shebelolon zebozeh. They were combined together. And one ate only one kazayas. There wasn't a kazayas only of pigel. There was a kazayas of all these three. They'll be chayev. Afalpi sheriba min al chaveiroi. Listen to this. Nevertheless, einoi mevatloi she'ein hoisura mevatlan zeh halacha chaf aleph upigel loy noiseroi tamei. If any one of these threes were de facto brought on top of the mizbeach, listen to this din. So I know that we learned a while back about the rule with exceptions, right? Now we're learning about another koyach of being on top of the mizbeach. Listen to this. It has to be beruban. Did it belong there? Of course not. It was pigel. But once it was burnt in its rive, paka isuran mehen. If something would have been burnt, not on the mizbeach, and you ate from the basar that was not yet burnt to kazayis, it'll be chayiv kares. Not over here. Another rule, v'ha'emurim mitztarfim basar likazayis. Then by oil it's easier because by your oil we take a halach. We do not differentiate between the emurim and the basar because everything has to be burnt, even by other kachim. L'chayiv all of mishum pigol and that means if you had a half a kazayis of emurim. That is pigel. You had a half a kazayas of basar. That's noiser. The hers was tutzach. Not only does pigel combine with noiser, a murim combines with basar. You ate it b'shoy, you get chai for carbon. Halacha chav beis. Zevach shenis pagel. Oy shenoisar la'achar zmanoi. And now you ate a part of it that's halachically not considered the edible part. For example, oy, that's clear. Morak, we had that yesterday or 2 days ago. Morak is the soup. We said that the soup is not part of the animal proper, even though it's imbued with the tam of the animal. Or spices, the spices that remained after you took the meat out. Or from the alol, we learned, I think it was yesterday, alol means that if when you skinned the oil, you didn't do a good job, some of the meat of the animal was on the skin part. even though you can scrape it off and eat it, once it's adhered only to the skin, it's not considered the edible part of the carbon. And the carbon became pigul. It's nicer, but you ate something that's not halachically an edible part. Or the mura, or the gidim, or the karnaim, or the teflayim, or the tziparnaim, the beak, we have all this, yes. Or from the feathers, or maybe even though you were not allowed to do it, but the penalty of kares, pigul and anoiser, also, if you were tamei, if you were the one tamei that was eating it, ein chayv kares. Chen tamei aguf she'achal dvarim elam mibasar kasher ein chayv kares. But don't worry, you'll get makas marbles. Halacha chav gimel. Ochal min ashlil. Either the fetus that was in a kachim or the shilya, which is the placenta. Here we say chayiv mishum pigul v'noiser v'tamei ka'oichel mishar b'sar hazevach.
It's edible.
It's edible. No, that's why you see today what people do that, right? There's antibodies in the placenta. Yeah, they took it all from the Torah. Alts come from the Torah. Halacha chavdal, the final halacha, kachim goyim.
The placenta is flesh.
Is flesh for you to be punished with kares if that flesh became pigul or noiser, or if you koyin your tamei. Kachim goyim.
Same as Nevedas and Treatise.
Much worse than Nevedas and Treatise.
No,
I think so. Yeah. Halacha chav daled. Kachei hagoyim ein chayav aleim mishum pigul noiser v'tamei. Wow. Now, dama kachim is bachal. Dama kachim, you can never have dam. But even by kachim, if someone ate the dam, even if that animal was figgled, you're only chayv mishum dam. So by goyim is the same thing. No, eating dam, chiv of dam, which is the worst thing. It's the kares and chatas kavua. Okay, but all of the other issues is only by karbanos that were from a owned by a yid. Ein chayon kares, loy mishum pigo, loy mishum noiser, loy mishum tumas hagov. And this we conclude Perek Yud Ches. We are learning now the final chapter of Psuli HaMukdashim, which is really quite awesome. For those of us that remember the Siyum of Truma, that's basically the whole Perek is the Siyum of Masechtas Tumura. What did we learn in Truma? That there are sometimes that the way we dispose of that which is not valid is through burning, right? Nisrafim, and what's the other option? Nikbarim. Some things are buried, and they differ one from the other. And the big cloud will be that even though one can argue that one is considered more chamer than the other, you have to follow its prescribed solution. Things that are meant to be nisrafim should be nisrafim. Things that are meant to be nikbarim have to be nikbarim. I know this is beyond only kachim. Great example will be we spoke about when we learned made the siyum about when people cut their nails. So do you bury them? Or do you burn them? So the midas chasida. So we'll speak it out when we come over here. That's where we have this srafim and but that will be the topic of the chapter. Perek Yud Tes has 15 halachas. Says that Amam Halacha Aleph Mitzvahs Asay Lisroif Kol HaKachim Shenit. Once something became tamei, it must be burnt. If you eat tamei, guys, don't forget, you're not going to be chayv kares. It's your turn, but you're even on the lot. It has to be burnt. Burnt. Huh? So we learned like this, and I'm going to write it again. They had 3 pyres. One in the Makkah Mazara, it's not clear where, but it was L'mizrachish al Mizbeach. One was on the Harabayas, and one was in Yerushalayim. And it has to do with where it became tamei, and if it not would have become tamei, where did it need to remain? So kachim that became tamei in the Azara, even though it's possible, it has to be burnt in the Azara. Something that could have been eaten in Yerushalayim that became tamei in Yerushalayim must be burnt in Yerushalayim. But that's the whole pit. Let's be. So first, it has to be burnt. Nukuda number 1 is that tuma, psuli hamikdashim from tuma has to be burnt. I got that. And the trader writes what you need to do, not bury, but the eishi sarek. The trader writes explicitly, not only don't eat it, don't make noiser, and don't eat it. If it's noiser, burn it. And even though this pasuk is speaking about shlamim, what we learned in the previous chapter, it's about any kachin that is beyond the right time. Ubechlal hanoisar automatically is pigul and v'chol psulei hamikdashim. Well, it's anything in the category of this, the way that Rambam is masadet hilchos psulei hamikudashim. If they are now puzzled, the mitzvah is to burn them. Halacha beis. Korban shenis pagel, or not pigul, but the puzzle. So now what we already established, burn. But when something that you know is already asur, you don't have to wait for it to become problematic to burn it. You sort of mikdash miyat. However, if something is only puzzle misafek, which is why the Rambam many times we learned didn't paskin, but there's a doubt. If it's a puzzle misafek, can you eat it? No. Can you burn it? No, because maybe it's not puzzle yet. So you have to wait until it becomes nicer. The way Chazal worded it is achet ubar tzurasim. Tavar tzurasi. Tavar tzurasi means two things. It means if it became so decomposed even prior to becoming nicer, if it's not edible, now you can burn it. Number two, normally things don't become. Tavar tzurasi literally means its form changed. It's not roi lachila. Normally it would mean it's not roi lachila al pi Allah.
So you're saying there's a lot of off meat in the.
I would argue that meat that you just overnight, if it's not very hot, is not off. No, tavar tzurasi doesn't only mean the way it means literally off. It means halachically off. Most meats become halachically off just the next morning. That's a tavar tzurasi, which means that even if it would not have been puzzled, now it's puzzled, and then burn it b'mikdash. Halacha gimel. Now, this is very important, though, just to add a nuance. We're speaking about they became puzzled prior to taking them out. If you took them out, there's nothing to talk about. Once you took them out, of course, they're going to be burnt out. We're speaking about chatos, the avodah of Adam, the chatos anasis b'fnim. They did that. They burned the imurim. But now this meat became tamei. It's still in the azara. Yesh bahem safek im halina v'hayitzia koidem sheyagia zmanom lotzeis. Oh, I want to add a detail. Danny, how would you interpret this? What does it mean? Koidem sheyagia zman lotzeis. Let me ask you something. What is the most essential thing for you to be allowed to burn the meat that has to be burned outside Yerushalayim? Zrikas Adam. Zrikas Adam. Here's the issue. So you didn't even have Zrikas Adam yet. But the meat became tummy. Why? Because of someone, the Shoigeg, who was tummy mace, was in there and touched it. And it's dead. While Chaim don't become tummy, the animal was geshacht. There isn't even Zrikas Adam. So there's a suffix. Yeshram suffix imalina vaitzia according to Gelazon Lotzes will pasil their psadim ke'emureim. The emurim that were taken out even before Zrikas Adam became possible. Here there's a doubt. And lefikach poislin oisam lahachmer. And bottom line will be is that if we consider them puzzle, so yoitze, and then you brought it back in, you have to burn it in the azara. Huh? Yeah, the question is where? That was your question. Where do you burn it? So I mentioned things that were going to be eaten in the azara. These are items that if everything would have been done properly, they would have been taken out. Here you might argue, burn it in the pyre, not only outside the azara, outside Harabayis, outside Yerushalayim. There's a doubt. And since there's a doubt, the machmer means burn it here. So there, really, once it left, leaving means roif. What happens if half of the animal left, but beroif for aver? So here there was a suffix in the Gemara whether we view that aver as being roiv out. In machzikin oise beyoytzei, hoy liyotz roiv aver, oyadayin ein yoytzin, sharei liyotz roiv behema. Once something that's puzzled of it is taken out of the azara, you will never bring it back in to burn it. Since there's a suffix in the Gemara whether this is considered roiv, if you view the animal as in an entirety, half of that, only half, you need roiv. If you look at this limb, roiv, ruba left. Because of the suffix, you burn it in the azara. Chein, another suffix about roiv. What happens if 5 people are carrying an animal out? 3 of the 5 walked out. So you have the majority of the kohanim. Only problem is that if you're looking at the animal, The three were only carrying half of the animal. Another suffix in the Gemara. And therefore, so we're speaking about something that becomes psul yoitze. But psul yoitze means roiv left. Psul yoitze has to be burnt where? So you would argue, if it became possible because you took it out, burn it out. No. Something could become psul yoitze, misafik, but you don't know whether it was taken out. So we have to be machmir by burning it. But where do you burn it? In the azara? Now, another detail. If the nifsal misafik, what do? You can't burn it right away. You cannot burn it right away. That's what the Rambam wrote in this chapter. You have to wait and then burn them in the azara. Oh, I'm sorry. I take it back what I just said. The Rambam is writing this only by animals who need to be burnt. Animals which the avodas adam is done with them. In this, the suffix is only whether they're considered to be moved, whether you burn them outside or inside. And the gay are waiting. Here you don't have to wait. Even if they would not be possible. The only question is, where are they meant to be burned? That's the only shayla. Not when should they be burned. Why should you have to wait? You're not doing anything wrong with burning it.
So kovish nispagel misafik.
Not nispagel. We're speaking about.
No, I'm saying before base.
Kosher not nisafik. You have to wait.
That you have to wait.
Yeah. Speaking about an animal. This is only on animals. Of any animals who was avodas hadam is done b'fnim. The animals that are the avodah of Yom Kippur that's done b'fnim. You have the parhelim davar shel tzibur. Or if there was an avodah zara, so there you have an oila and a chatos. There the din is that they have to be burnt outside. So since they have to be burnt anyways, we're discussing here where do you burn them. So whenever there's a suffix, whether it's called yaitz or not, machmir is burning in the azara, but you don't have to wait. So we want to know, we don't know what this meat is. What is the presumption? If you find a varim, you presume it was oilos. If you find chatichos, you presume it's chatois. Basar that's found in Yerushalayim, you presume it's shlamim. And therefore what? And therefore, v'harkoil ta'avor tzurasan, the yotzel beis asreifa. Why? Why don't you eat them? Because maybe you found them after they were noiser. Now, are they noiser bavada? You don't know that yet. So make sure they become noiser. Now here's the kasha. If anyways you're saying that any meat that's found, maybe it's noiser and you have to wait until it's vada and burn it. So why did we have to say that this might be oilers, this might be chatois, l'may nafkamina? The answer is and 1 second, we didn't learn Hilchas Me'ila yet. We're getting there. It's an avodah. And what's the klal that a carbon oila shayach to Me'ila? Whoever eats a carbon oila is chayv Me'ila. Whoever eats even chatois kachikachin, avada shlamim, he will never bring a carbon Me'ila. That's why you have to know. When again the din of you not being allowed to eat it, it's suffix psuli hamukdashim, and the din is it has to be burnt, but you have to wait. If you have a suffix, wait until it's for sure. I'll tell you another nafkamina.
If someone's over,
I'll tell you more than that. If shlamim, how long do you have to wait for you to be able to burn it? The taver tzurasan by shlamim, maybe the shechita was done today, so the taver tzurasan is 2 days and 1 night. Okay. Another rule, even though it becomes nicer, the shlamim becomes nicer at night, you only burn it by day. Now, even though shlamim can only eat in 2 days and 1 night, and that's bein bismanoin, bein shaloi bismani. Whether you discovered it at night, whether you discovered the meat, guys, you know that now it became nicer. I know it became nicer now. I know this animal was the shachtan. Today is Yud Dalet. I know that the shlamim was burned Yom Yud Gimel. If you know that and you found it Yud Dalet going into Tazvav, it became nicer now. You can't burn it now. Can't eat it. You have to wait until tomorrow. Even if you know this animal was brought Yom Yud. We're out of Shabbos. It's many days after it was nicer. You may never burn it at night. Another rule, nothing to talk about Shabbos, not even Yom Tov. What do? You make sure no one eats it, and then you burn it after Shabbos and Yom Tov. What's the chiddush, Danny? If I burn noiser together with toma, what happens? I'm being metama that meat. I don't care about that, and that will be some of what we're going to learn in a moment. Halacha vav. Psar kotche kotchim shenitma bifnim. Where do you burn it? You burn it bifnim, because if this meat would have not become tamei, it would have been eaten bifnim. If it became tamei bachutz already, it's outside. If it became tamei bachutz, so for noisim bachutz, bein benitma ba'avatuma, bein benitma baladatuma. Umiyamem shol koyanim loy nibnu milisrayv es habasar shenitma ba'avatuma. That was what we learned in Rab Chanina Skana Kayan. So guys, this is what we're talking about. If I have meat that became a tummy ba'avatuma, what status does the meat have a rishon? Let's say you have meat that became tummy by a sheni, which means what is this meat? A shlishi. If I'm going to burn together a rishon and a shlishi, they're both tummy, midoi rice. But one might have argued, now I'm making the meat that's a shlishi, Hasheni. I added to its tuma. Like now, if this meat will touch something else, the chain would go one step further. It's not a problem. They were not concerned about that. By making it into a sheni, and there are consequences. Will become a sheni, as we will learn in Sefer Tahara. And now this is not only where you are only bringing it up one notch, it's shayach by kachim that you're going to bring it up two biblical notches. Also, we don't care. For example, this shemen is a shlishi. Okay, he's giving a case of a shlishi. You can burn it inside a metal holder, a metal lamp. If this metal lamp touched the mace, what does this snare become? The snare becomes an av. The snare becomes an av. There's the ingin of halal cherev. We'll leave that for another time. No. If the lamp touches a mace, touches a mace, that'll be a voice. The snare is an av. It can be even worse. And then sometimes we say the halal cherev. Yeah, in a case where you have a metal utensil that is an av, and you are burning in it kachim, that's tamei on the level of a shlishi. The same nukuda, you're bringing it up two notches. That's the point. You're not going from shlishi to sheni. Something that touches an av becomes a rishon. They also they were not concerned about it. Af al pisha zeh Hashem anasa rishon. That means you bumped it up two notches. Kishi yig up in there. The nate is an av dani. Hoyel v'yesh sham shum tuma. Ein makpidim al toisafta. The ain is on him ella minatoyer shaloi pasel halacha zayin loiser shal kachim kalim. And they got Tommy, guys. When they got Tommy in Yerushalayim, fine. So they are burnt in Yerushalayim. So for nice all of it, the thing. Now I have a kasha. I don't live in Yerushalayim. I live in Sfas. I went to Yerushalayim, to the Beis Hamikdash. On the way back, Misha Yotze in Yerushalayim, and on so many levels it's problematic. But Psul Yotze, he had kachei kala meat. He forgot. Not only did he not eat it, which is that in itself is problematic, he by mistake took it out of the walls of Yerushalayim. Now where do you have to burn it? Can I say, since it now is outside Yerushalayim, burn it outside Yerushalayim? So it depends. Depends how far you are. Im avad from the location called Soifim, there's a whole machlekes what that refers to. No, but since you are that far away, you don't have to return to burn it in Mokem Achilosim. Then Soifim b'Mekaymer, no matter where the Mokem is. But ve'im lav, and you are outside Chomes Yerushalayim, but you are within the location of Soifim. If there is a kazayas or more, then you have to burn it in Yerushalayim. Now let's go into that case. When I burn it in Yerushalayim, if I live in Yerushalayim, I get to go home. If I don't own a home in Yerushalayim, so it's very hard for me to burn it. You know where I will have to burn it? I'm going to go back to the Makam HaMikdash. The Makam HaMikdash will not mean the Azara. I'm not going to bring it into the Azara. I'm not allowed to bring it into the Azara. Psul Yotze, I'll burn it on Harabayas. And now when I burn it on Harabayas, here comes at least one leniency. Since I don't own a home. So mitzad echad, they're being stringent on me. I have to go back to the Bida, which means here to the Harabayas. At least I don't have to provide wood. If I don't have to go all the way back to Harabayas, if I burn it in my home, then I have to use my wood. There, I can use the wood belonging to the temple. The wood belonging to the temple was designated to go on the altar. No, it was not. Laid based in Masna that it can be used for this also. Then on one hand, you're machmer, sarfer lifnei habira, which means harabayas, but you're makel that you get to use the atzei amarah. Halacha tes. Kol atzmois hakachim she'ein bahem moyach. No meat, no marrow. Bachlal don't have to be burnt, with the only exception of atzmois pesach. Another rule, kvar biyarnu, shehakarben shenitzel achar shehufshat. The din will be, even though the carbon is puzzled, but the oil belongs to the krihanim. The oil is only bottled to the meat, and it becomes puzzled with the meat if it's connected to the meat. If the whole issue only came about after you skinned it, then the oil goes to the kahanim. Or if it's kachikalim, the oil gets to go to the ba'olim. So then we consider, since you did not skin it yet, once the Torah paskins that this meat has to be burned, that includes the hide. You skinned it, and now you discover it to be a treifa, or you now discover shenifshal b'machshavas hazman machshavas hamakoin. Even though you only discovered it, Yaakov, after the skinning it, but now you discover that even prior to skinning it, it was already puzzled, then you saw it for oil. However, not by chatas and pesach, which means the carbon itself is not possible. Goes to the kahanim, or the oil goes to the ba'alav. Another din v'zevach shohufshat koydam zerika ain't a puzzle. It's amazing. In other words, since when they did the zrika sadam, it's amazing. The zrika sadam will be matir the oil for the kahanim and the meat to the ba'alim. Even though the animal is a treifa, doesn't matter. The zrika is needed. The zrika was matir the oil. Halacha. Now, everything that we learned until now are items that the resolution is burning them. Suli hamigdashim. So let's add halacha yud. Elohein hanesrafim. Psar kodesh shenitma oy noisar oy nifsar. Chen hamincha shenitmeis oy nifsala oy noisra. Va'asham talui shenoid aloi shaloi chata. Yaakov, what are your words? Koydem. You see, very good. This is the third time today, at least in the Chayim. This is a big mistake. Guys, don't forget that Asham Talui, once you did Zerika Saddam, we learned that explicitly. If you discovered after Zerika Saddam, oops, I ate the shuman, not the chalev, no problem. The carbon is a real carbon. But if you discover prior to Zerika Saddam that you didn't sin, that's where you have a problem. Then it became invalidated. Koydem Zerik, not Acher. Chatos oif that comes on the suffix. Even though the beauty is that the only carbon chatos that can come on the suffix is a bird, because normally chatos has to come for a sin. If you have a suffix, you may not bring an animal. The bird you bring, but the bringing of the bird only means the mitzvah and the zrika and the mitzvah, not achilo. It has to be burnt. Or sa'ar nazar toir, that's burnt under the dud of the shlamim, or arla that has to be burnt. Kilei akerem, all of these things are eluhein hanesrafim. Guys, that's Masechtas Temurah. For example, mashkin of arla, people don't burn mashkin, or kilei akerem. There, the din is, even though the general rule of arla, my friends, is burn it. Here, you have to yikavru. Guys, mashkin of kilei akerem. Because kilei akerem has to be nisrafim. Mashkin has to be buried. Halacha yud aleph, and now in contrast, ve'elohem anikbarim. What has to be dafke buried? Dafke kachem shemesu. Bury them. Then kachem mizbeach, whether they were imbued with kedushas mizbeach, whether they were only consecrated to the Berekabayis. Kachem shehi pilu, same concept. What do you do with the nafel? So we learned before, you can't eat it. Now what do you do with it? You have to bury it. You cover it on there, not burn it.
What about the olive?
All of it. He pilu shilya tikover shoy haniskol egla rufa tzipari mitzoida sa'an nozer tamei peter chamoir basar b'chalav, the chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. All of that has to be buried. Halacha yud beis. Ha'oideg maloi hasit misa'ar nazir. Guys, maloi hasit, just to remember the measurements, is when you open up your thumb and your index, the amount of space between the tip of your thumb and the index is called maloi hasit. So if you use sa'ar hanazir, which needed to be buried, and you wove it into a garment, that amount or more, or a sit from a peter chamoy, you wove it into a sack. What do we say over here? Here we say you have to burn it and not bury it. Burn it. No, it's burn it. And that, no, why not you cover? I'm not even talking about it. You have to learn the Gemara. All these apsuk. Halacha you give kol hanik barim. What's the nafkamina? One huge nafkamina. Anything that has to be buried, even after you buried it, or if you burnt it, no matter what, you may not have hana from the ashes. It's also no even after it changed. But kol hanisrafim shel hegdesh, once they are burned, the ephod becomes mutter, ephra mutter, with the exception of deshen mizbeach hachitzon. We're not speaking about hoitzos hadeshen. Make no mistake. We're speaking about the mitzvah of trumas hadeshen, the daily, the dishun of the mizbeach hapnimi daily, the dishun hamanoida daily. In other words, over there, what's the word? You have to burn them, even though you have to burn them. Ephron are asur. No.
So that should be buried.
No, the Ephraim
It ends up being burned.
No.
Can't use the ashes.
Chutz midesh. Chol hanesrafim shel hegdish. Ephron mutter. Chutz Ephron asur. Halacha yida. Kol hanesrafim. Now, kol hanesrafim lo yikavu. That makes sense, right? Because kavura, you're adding. Don't add. The kol hanegbarim lo yisaf. You can argue, why can't you burn it? But no, like burning it is getting rid of it quickly, but that's going to be a hekel be'efrim. Final halacha of the entire Psulei Hamikdashim, halacha tezvav, says that Rambam, a kohen is working with your carbon, and he tells you now nispaglu. Now comes the din of memonos. Nispaglu, when the meat is here, it will be eaten if not for the fact that it would be pigul. Or when a kohen is working with you and food that is otherwise known to be toy, he tells you this now is tamei. What did we learn now? That even if the kohen is toy, if the meat is tamei, he's chayv malchus for eating. We believe him. 1 second. You have to understand another rule. What he's basically telling you, he's telling you something that he knows will cause this to be burnt, right? So then, we don't suspect that someone is going to lie regarding perfectly okay kachem when he's basically saying to burn it if it would not be emes. That's the reason why we believe him. Now, take away that reason. You know, what do I mean take away the reason? What happens if a kohen tells you, I remember the carbon that I brought to you last week. It's already eaten up. I made it pigul. Bring another one. Here, he's not making something being burnt. But there's nothing left from it now. There's no immediate consequence other than the fact you have to bring another one. Or those tahadis became tamei. He doesn't have this carte blanche. Nemanos, here we say it depends. You believe him. You have this in many areas in Allah. All right, if a woman tells her husband she was mizana. So first of all, we say normally she has no nemanos because shema yitna eino ba'acher. But there is a concept that if you believe her, in other words, if you believe this kohen, shema chal devarav, and you know what that would mean? That you have to bring another carbon. But im lav, by the letter of the law, if not for this logic that no one is going to lie to make good kachem being burned, that's good. If you don't have that, nevertheless, Rachmana Desayan. Tomorrow we begin with Hilchas Avodas Yom Kippurim. We're going backwards. We're going now from Kachem into Mesechtes Yom.